Good morning. First, I'd like to introduce the organized one and the lovely one in the pair this morning. Teresa.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, for this great event and our ability to honor our inductees.
Thanks, Teresa. First of all, I'd like to thank the Asb Hall of Fame Evaluation Committee. It's a privilege to work with this group of people. And they continue to volunteer to evaluate nominees, and this year's nominees. When I call your name, please stand to be recognized. Fred Springer, Robert Benton, Russ Bundy, Laurie Gorton, Rowdy Brixey, Bill Zimmerman, Ed Stigler, Bill McCurry, Len Kilby, and last but not least, Eddie Perot. Thank you all. I'd also like to recognize the companies that have stepped forward and sponsored this year's induction ceremony: Bundy Baking Solutions, Burford, Graincraft, Lamatic, Mother Murphy's, and the Long Company. Consistent with Ramon's theme of innovation, we're happy to have a slate of recipients that are all great innovators and will prove to be that, and we'll have the opportunity to learn from them today and in the near future. First, Bob Albers. Bob was raised in Gridley, California. He grew up hunting with his dad and brother. Bob was a high school basketball star and received a scholarship to Sacramento University. After graduation, Bob was recruited by Continental Baking Company. He began as a route sales representative and quickly moved on to bakery sales manager, regional sales manager, and general manager of the Portland, Oregon Wonder Bread Bakery. Bob was asked to relocate to ITT Continental Baking Company's general office in Rye, New York. Joe Franz asked Bob if he really wanted to move his family. Joe offered Bob the position of vice president and general manager of Franz Bakery in Portland, Oregon in 1975. Bob accepted. Bob and Joe made a great team. It was a push-pull relationship, Bob would say. Let's go, and Joe would say, slow down. Joe was an introvert, Bob was an extrovert. Joe was the solid financial planner. Bob was the young, aggressive guy who wanted to grow the business, and grow they did. Bob Albers and Joe Franz acquired Buttercup Bakery in Gresham, Oregon, Pioneer Bakery in Bend, Oregon, Snyder's Bakery in Yakima, Washington, Langendorf Bakery in Portland, Oregon, Interstate Bakery in Spokane, Washington, Smith Bakery in Salem, Oregon, and Bogey Bakery in Spokane. And sadly, Joe Franz passed away in 1988. Bob Albers and his friends' team then acquired Williams Bakery in Eugene, Smith Cookie Bakery in McKinville, Gay's Bakeries, 2 plants in Seattle, Washington, Fleur's Bakery in Eureka, California. I'm getting tired just reading it. Fleur's Bakery in California, Harvest Classic Bakery in Nampa, Idaho, and the cycle completed: Wonder Hostess Bakeries in Seattle, Washington, Salt Lake, Billings, Montana, Anchorage, Alaska. Not a bad run for a small-town kid from Gridley, California. Bob Albers is a visionary. Bob installed a street fighter mentality in the sales department that was borrowed from one of the bakeries he acquired. When he saw something exceptional in a new acquisition, it was installed throughout the company. That small little Franz Bakery in Portland, Oregon, where Bob showed up in 1975, is still a producing bakery. The $10 million company has exploded since then, and thanks to the leadership of the visionary Bob Albers. Please welcome 2016 Baking Hall of Fame inductee, Bob Albers.
Well, thank you very much. This is a great industry. It's kind of like preaching to the choir when someone tells us that we love bread. I love bread, cookies, pies, cakes, donuts. Ever since I've been in the baking industry, I can tell you I have not been to work a day in my life. It's been fun. It's been great. It's been rewarding. And I think when other people look at the baking industry, I mean, I listen to a lot of people in Oregon, West Coast, you see the tech companies out there, they start talking about margins 20, 30, 45, 50%. We dream of things like that. If we make 3%, we do cartwheels. This honor is unbelievable. I'm joining a great group of people. And I think, you know, you've received other honors in various towns for work that we do. But when a group of your peers get together and elect you to a Hall of Fame in an industry that you're all involved in, man, how can you not feel great about it? And I tell you, the next best thing about it is you gave it to me when I'm still on this side of the ground. You know, and I'm not going to tell you anything you haven't known. No one person does all these things. You have a team, and I was very fortunate that over the years we got together, everybody did a great job, and it just pushed our company upward, and it pushed me upward at the same time. And I guess if you develop a talent over the years, mine has been, man, pick good people and then sit back and play golf. I've got 2 children in the business today, my oldest daughter, Kim, and my son, Mark. And they have a group of people, and some of them are here, and they're going to be charged with coming forward. And, you know, as we watched this movie a little earlier, change through innovation, I mean, boy, change through consumer products. We started out with just plain simple old white bread, and we were all baking white and wheat buns and conies. Boy, not anymore. We have 3,200 different line items. And on a daily basis, and our biggest problem going forward is not going to be all this stuff. It's our government regulations that they keep hitting us with. We are now giving, in the state of Washington, they are now going to tell us that we have to produce a schedule for our employees 7 days in advance for them so we can know. You know, do they understand we're perishable products? We supply restaurants, and we don't know sometimes until the next day or the day before what they want, and ads. It's very difficult. Unfortunately, we're watching a new, I guess you call it, debate for people that's going to become president. It gets a little humorous at times. But I thank these people. Today I'm backing out of the business, my kids and a bunch of other. But I want to bring attention to one guy. I've been 54 years in the baking industry, starting out with Wonder Bread. I met a guy named Ron McKnight. And he and I have worked together pretty much for 45 of those years together. And he's every bit as part of what this stands for me as I am. I tell you, I'm very humble. I appreciate this business. I appreciate this award, and I thank you very much for it.
As a grateful industry, we welcome Bob Albers as an inductee in the 2016 Bakery Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much.
Once again, Teresa's keeping me on track. This is a privilege. Jacob Perkins and Joseph Baker, founders of family enterprises that eventually became Baker Perkins, were both North Americans who found business success in England. Jacob Perkins spent the largest part of his working life experimenting with high-pressure steam. An early patent for nail-making machinery was signed by George Washington. In 1819, he moved to England from Massachusetts. Later, rights to the first ram and knife dough divider were acquired, which, along with steam tube ovens, laid the foundations of both the company and modern plant bakery equipment. A Canadian named Joseph Baker simplified the task of removing impurities from stone-milled flour and decided to test the market in England in the 1870s. The business grew rapidly as a supplier of machinery to the bakery business, bakery, biscuit, chocolate, and confectionery industries. Meanwhile, the Perkins Company concentrated on a widening range of bakery equipment for the home market. Before the two rivals combined, the Bakers bought a factory in Saginaw, Michigan, which became the company's manufacturing base in North America for the next 60 years. Baker Perkins' operations in North America were later centered on Grand Rapids, Michigan, after the company bought Werner Lahara in 1978, a business that began life in 1904 as the Dutch Cookie Machine Company. The inventive work of generations of Baker Perkins engineers can still be seen in modern high-output bakeries today, from the ram and knife divider to the combined proofer and oven. The legacy of Baker Perkins' relentless pursuit of excellence is still evident. Here to accept the award is the owner of Baker Perkins, John Embleton Calks from Peterborough, England.
Good morning. You must forgive me, I'm not very used to doing this. I'm really pleased to accept this award on behalf of Joseph and Jacob, the Baker and Perkins. I would also like to thank those that put Baker Perkins forward for this award, and I would extend my congratulations to the fellow inductees today. Joseph Baker and Jacob Perkins never met one another. They were a generation apart. Jacob Perkins was born in Massachusetts in 1766. In his early life, he started work as a watchmaker, but he very soon started working for the American Mint. And at the time of independence, he was responsible for developing the casting system for imprinting your coins, American coins, and also for printing banknotes. What was unique about the system was they were very hard to forge. In those days, the plates that were used for making notes were printed on copper, and they were very easy for people. They didn't last long, and they were very difficult to duplicate. He came up with a system that made it easy. And it was this that brought him to England in 1819, sorry. He was interested in using high-pressure steam, encapsulated steam, for his central heating system. But he was approached by somebody to build an oven. And he used the system to develop the oven for the baker industry, which is now pretty much a standard throughout the world. And he showed it all over the world. He showed it in every exhibition, including here in Chicago in 1893. And by the end of the 1800s, these ovens were installed all over the world. They were from Russia through Europe, South Africa, America, South America, you name it, they were there. So it was a huge business. Largely, the success was down to Jacob Perkins' son and grandson. Perkins was a typical inventor, a brilliant man. He ranked alongside Edison, for instance, for what he did. But he never made any money. As soon as he started having a success, he went off and spent it on doing something else and left others to make the money. The company he formed printed to do stamps, make the stamps used throughout America and throughout Europe, printed 22 billion stamps. And he made a lot of money. Perkins got nothing out of it. All the money went to his other two partners. He was off doing other things. So he wasn't a very good businessman, although he was a good inventor. The Baker family were from Trenton in Ontario. He was a farmer, and they were Quakers, and very concerned about health and the general well-being of the people that work for them, as Quakers are. He was confined to the house on one occasion when he had a bad bout of gout or flu or some disease. And he saw his wife struggling to sift the flour to make bread. And he invented a very simple handheld sifter. It was greatly accepted by his wife, then family and friends. And eventually he finished up employing 30 people who travelled all over North America selling this sifter. It must have been quite a sight because they dressed in long coats and wore silk top hats and carried a cane and walked around door to door knocking on the door saying, "Excuse me, would you like to buy my flour sifter?" But they sold them by the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions. They were looking to expand and thought the chances were more in Europe than in America, than staying here in the States. So they moved to London in 1878 and started making the sifter there. But in very short order, they got involved in manufacturing equipment for the biscuit industry and the bread industry. And by 1891, they'd only been in England for 3 years, he was a fierce rival of the Perkins family. At this stage, the Perkins family were down to Loftus Perkins, who was the grandson of Jacob. And really, they were losing their way. They were not being very successful. And they were all very ill. Both Loftus Perkins and his father died within a few years of each other. The two companies continued their operations, and they actually worked together during the First World War. They made lots of armaments. They made tank turrets and 25-pound guns and towed guns and howitzers, all sorts of things you wouldn't expect a baking company to make. But it was necessary. We had to pull together during those horrendous time to try to get out of it. And at the end of that, Baker bought Perkins, and we became Baker Perkins in about 1920, 1918. The Bakers, as I said, were a Quaker family, and they were very interested in the welfare of the worker. They did much to improve the life of the working bakery and the working baker. They came up with cleaner, more hygienic systems, clean operating areas. They were concerned with the health and well-being of the people, and it was always at the forefront of their developments. They believed in excellence in design, encouraged passion in their subject, and their ability to adapt from their employees. These attributes are still very important to Baker Perkins today. I bought the company 10 years ago this week. The company's products have played quite an important part in my own life. I started work in 1963, and the first thing I worked in the paint manufacturing business, and we used Baker Perkins mixers to mix paint and varnishes. I went on from there to work in the printing industry, and we used Baker Perkins presses in the printing industry. I went on from there into the defense industry, and in the defense industry we used Baker Perkins machinery for making training ammunition and items for safety at life at sea. So the span of Baker Perkins is huge. It covers all items. Now I employ 400, mostly engineers, and on average they have 25 years service each. So that's 10,000 years of engineering experience we have, which is dedicated to our profession, is dedicated to baking, be it cereal or bread or snack or biscuit or whatever. So I know I've gone on a bit, but it is really with an enormous pleasure I accept this honour on behalf of Baker and Perkins. They were exceptional men, both of them. And I'd like to thank the evaluation committee for the hard work they have put in. They clearly know as much about Baker Perkins as I do from what they've said during the introduction and what's been written by the local press. So thank you to the evaluation committee, and thank you for making me and my wife so welcome here today. You've been very generous hosts. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, as a grateful industry, we honor Baker Perkins as a 2016 inductee into the Bakery Hall of Fame.
Thank you. I'll take this over.
It is my extreme honor to introduce our next inductee into the Hall of Fame, Mr. Pat Callahan. Pat began his career in his home state of Massachusetts, where he obtained his Bachelor of Science degree from Stonehill College and a Master's of Business Administration from Suffolk University. His first job in the industry was sales for Nabisco, where he spent days taking orders and stocking shelves. In 1979, Pat joined Pepperidge Farm. During his 33 years at Pepperidge Farm, he worked his way through the ranks from a sales account manager to president. He led the firm to one of the strongest growth periods, with 7 consecutive years of top line, bottom line, and share growth in a challenging industry. Pat's tenure at Pepperidge Farm is remembered as one of consumer-focused product innovation, and thus it was only fitting that in 2012, upon his retirement, the new Innovation Center was named in his honor, Patrick J. Callahan Innovation Center. While leading the firm, Pepperidge Farm won Best Company to Work For, which can be attributed to Pat's people come first leadership style, as well as his mantra taught by his father of always making sure he shares his success with others. Pat's tenure as president is remembered as one of hard work, tenacity, and respect for others. He is admired for his passion, his authenticity, and good humor, a strong business sense, and thoughtful leadership style left Pepperidge Farm in the top 2% of brand equities worldwide upon his retirement in 2012. Pat's work within the baking industry is extensive. He has served as chairman of the American Bakers Association, as well as serving on the Board of Trustees of the American Institute of Baking and the Board of Directors for the Biscuit and Cracker Manufacturing Association. He also helped create the Grain Foods Foundation, an organization formed to educate consumers about the importance of grains in their diet. Pat values his roots, recently receiving Alumnus of the Year honors from both his high school and college, and is thankful for the constant support of his family, including his wife Gretchen and daughters Megan and Caitlin. Please welcome Pat Callahan.
Wow. Thank you, Teresa. And, this is simply a wonderful day and a completely unexpected moment in my life. I'm thankful and truly appreciative and incredibly humbled by this extraordinary award. I'd like to thank the American Society of Baking, its membership, its board, the evaluation committee, for this very, very distinguished and valued recognition. And it's obviously an honor to be recognized with this year's, talented leadership group, Bob Albers, Dr. Schellenberg, Mrs. Baker and Perkins, as well as last year's august leaders that were inducted into the Hall of Fame. George Deese, Gary Prince, the brothers Murphy, the cousins Warburg, the list goes on and on over the years since 2006 of extraordinary leaders who have had a major impact in the baking industry and therefore on the lives of millions and millions and millions of consumers over those years. But what's actually incredibly touching and memorable to me is that not only am I joining this group of distinguished and exceptional leaders, but I'm joining a group that actually includes Margaret Rudkin, the dynamic entrepreneurial founder of Pepperidge Farm in 1937. And she was inducted, who started the Pepperidge Farm by just simply baking a healthier loaf of bread for her asthmatic son. And she was inducted in 2006 in the inaugural class of this Bakery Hall of Fame. So I truly am excited and I'm humbled to be joining the other 70 members of this hall, and particularly Mrs. Rudkin. I'd also like to thank several people. Chris Foley of Pepperidge Farm, the Pepperidge Farm leadership team that's here, Rob Mackey from the American Bakers Association, putting the effort together to nominate me. And I'd also like to thank many individuals, the many individuals that actually wrote letters of support on my behalf, two of whom, Doug Conant and Denise Morrison, the former and the current CEOs of Campbell Soup and my bosses over the last 7 or 8 years of my life at Pepperidge Farm, obviously had nicer things to say about me in those nominating letters than they actually did in my annual reviews. But I also want to thank the thousands of wonderful and dedicated people over the year that worked at Pepperidge Farm, the employees, who taught me, who nurtured me, who motivated me, who inspired me by their individual and collective efforts to continually drive a stream of consumer-driven innovation, coupled with the ability to continuously deliver strong business results. And for me, it's hard to believe that it's 37 years since I joined Pepperidge Farm after working in sales for Nabisco for 6 or 7 years. And, at that time, Pepperidge Farm was a very small regional bakery up in the Northeast. Sales well under $200 million at the time. Our goldfish sales were under $5 million at the time. And today, through the effort of many of the talented and passionate Pepperidge Farm employees, particularly this leadership team that's here today, the company has grown more than 10 times that size, and the Goldfish brand has grown more than 100 times that size. So for me, it was a wonderful opportunity to join a small company, but a company that was growing, because that provided all types of career opportunities for me. And I know that the room's filled with engineers and R&D people, and I wanted, if I could, just to share a very brief story on how the engineers as a group impacted my career. Because I remember one of my first jobs in marketing when I joined Pepperidge Farm, and of course we had a department of 2 at the time. was to lead a repositioning of our breakfast spreads, improving the cinnamon appearance by replacing the old reversible sheeter molders and making a continuous sheet of dough where the cinnamon could be deposited to make a more pronounced and visible swirl that the consumers loved. Well, I was a young marketing guy, and I was thrilled because the engineers and the R&D team that were running the project at that time invited me to the plant for the first shaking down of that line. And I thought, man, this is great. You know, I'm sort of new to the company, I'm new to this position. These guys really like me, you know. They value my opinion, they value my knowledge. Well, what I found out was that they were actually running the testing on a night owl downshift and just needed me for a free labor. Specifically, my job was to chunk the dough out of the dough trough, toss it 8 feet into the hopper, which fed the sheeter, for around 6 straight hours. And I guess that was sort of marketing in those days. But you know, I made my time with those R&D and engineering teams on those 2 days very worthwhile. I learned so much by talking and peppering all of them with questions about the formula, the process, and what else can we do with this equipment. We went out to dinner that night, and all of us just talked about the capabilities and the new products that we could run off of that equipment. And it, you know, and after 2 days, of chunking dough, I actually thought they started to like me. And it gave me, that moment, those 2 days gave me great insight on how to evolve different functions in the process of innovation, and to provide a forum for individuals to have their ideas heard and to feel valued. That learning really stood me well in my career. So indirectly, I have the engineers and R&D groups to thank for me standing here today. In closing, I want to thank the most important people in my life. It's my family, who supported me in both the good and the challenging times. My oldest daughter, Megan, who's not here, but who for years, when she was a teenager, would run her own. When I'd bring home new products on the weekend, she'd bring over her teenage friends. They'd evaluate the products, tell how badly most of them were, but they'd provide nice written reports, and candidly, they were pretty good in what they liked and disliked. And my daughter, Caitlin, who's here, who when she was younger, when we were bringing home streams of those computer papers, I guess with all the reports on them, KPIs as you would probably know them today, I'd often highlight them in yellow and green pen, and that's what she would do with me. She'd stand there and just highlight in yellow and green the performance of some of the team members, I suppose. But also, Caitlin loved the storyboard and the advertising part of our business, and she believes to this day that she actually wrote many of the ads that would run on print and television advertising. And finally, to my wife Gretchen, who convinced me to join Pepperidge Farm, who convinced me to stay with Pepperidge Farm, and thankfully convinced me to retire from Pepperidge Farm. She was always a calming and thoughtful influence, obviously a counterbalance to my not always calm and thoughtful manner. So Gretchen, thank you. And for all of you, thank you again for this most distinguished and wonderful recognition. I'm incredibly humbled and I'm incredibly proud. Thank you.
As a grateful Milano cookie fan and a grateful industry, we welcome Patrick Callahan as an honoree in the 2016 Bakery Hall of Fame.
So it is my distinct honor to introduce the next inductee into the Hall of Fame. As many in the room, like myself, who graduated from Kansas State in the Grain Science Department, we spent many hours in the hall named after Dr. John Schellenberger. John Schellenberger was born in 1900. He went from riding a horse in a one-room school in Moline, Illinois, to seeing a man land on the moon. John was introduced to the milling industry by a teenager, W.L. Haley, chief chemist at Fisher Flour Milling Company. He achieved a degree in chemical engineering for the University of Washington while employed at Fisher. He earned his master's degree in milling technology from Kansas State University. This led to a position as assistant agriculture chemist at the University of Idaho. John reached his final academic milestone at the University of Minnesota, where he attained a doctorate in biochemistry. Later, he accepted a position at Manel Milling Company in Fostoria, Ohio, where a colleague introduced him to his future wife, Annabelle. They were blessed with 3 daughters and 8 grandchildren. Dr. Schellenberger was the recipient of 3 awards for his work in cereal chemistry: the Gold Medal of the Association of Operative Millers, the Newman Medal of the Association of Cereal Research, and the Outstanding Achievement Gold Medal of the University of Minnesota. 2 awards from the American Association of Cereal Chemists International, the first recipient of the Frank Schwann Award and the C.H. Bailey Award. In addition, he received 2 distinguished alumni medals from Kansas State University. For 21 years, John was head of the Department of Flour and Feed Milling Industries at Kansas State University, expanding the industry and working with state legislators to enhance the milling program to include feed and baking programs. During his career at Kansas State, he embarked upon numerous overseas assignments on grain technology for the U.S. government, foreign countries, and private companies. Kansas State University recognized his contributions by naming the milling industries building Schellenberger Hall in 1970. He remained active as Distinguished Professor Emeritus until his death in 1987. Dr. John A. Schellenberger committed his vigor, education, intelligence, and practical experience to the milling and baking industry. Milling and Baking News remembered his life as, quote, one of the most influential in the modern history of breadstuffs, unquote. Please join me in welcoming one of his daughters to the stage to accept this award.
Well, good morning. Actually, you get all 3 daughters this morning. Thank you for inviting us to join you this morning. As you just heard from Teresa, John and Annabelle Schellenberger had 3 daughters, and we are all here this morning. I am Margot Cayley, and my sisters and I are honored to be here this morning to accept this honor on behalf of our father, John Schellenberger, into the Baking Hall of Fame. When Teresa called me and told me that Dad was going to be inducted into the Baking Hall of Fame, you know, it really does take your breath away. And then as you have a chance to process this, you realize what a huge honor this is. And then I got to thinking, because he was 53 when I was born, and it made me realize how much he was juggling with a small kid and 2 other sisters running through the house, and they're trying to manage the affairs of the department. My sisters and I wish to thank the Evaluation Committee and Teresa Cogswell for the hard work and dedication to the Baking Hall of Fame. Thank you to Executive Director Kent for all his mentoring through this process. And thank you to the 6 companies, sponsors, for their support. Executive Editor Lori Gordon, you did the family proud with your article on Dad in the February issue of Baking and Snack. And finally, we wish to give our heartfelt congratulations to the other Baking Hall of Fame inductees and to their families. Growing up, I always thought every family had a mom, a dad, and a department. We really thank you for honoring Dad, his beloved department, and Kansas State University. And now I'd like to introduce my sister, Joan Black.
Good morning. We want to thank the American Society of Baking for the hospitality that has been extended to the family. We're also so grateful to Teresa and the Baking Hall of Fame Committee for recognizing and making this tribute to our father's work. Over the past few months, it has been so meaningful for the family to review his career. Dad could not have accomplished all that he did without the support of our mother, Annabelle Gangneth Schellenberger. She managed the house and us, edited his work, and she served as a wonderful hostess for the School of Grain Science and Industry and mentored the families of foreign students and professors at Kansas State. They were an absolutely amazing team. But now Karen Stearns is going to tell you a little bit more about John Schellenberger, the man.
Thank you, and he did love bread. He would, every bake day when they had test bake, he'd come home with the bag of little pup loaves, and we had fresh bread on the table, and bread was on the table every night, so in following the day's theme, he loved bread. As Joan said, I'm the oldest daughter, and it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about our memories of our father. As mentioned, he was born in Moline, Illinois, lived in Ellensburg, Washington, eventually Seattle. And his father was superintendent of public parks in Seattle, and his mother was an artist. As a young man, he owned an Indian motorcycle, much to his mother's dismay, and she had good reason to be concerned because one night he missed a turn on a curvy, dark road and rode down a logging chute into an inlet of the Pacific. He had a number of interesting jobs as a young man. As a small child, we'd visit Seattle because his parents lived there, and he took me to the Seattle Zoo and showed me the elephant enclosure that he helped build while he worked construction. He worked in the Seattle shipyards, and he was a quality tasting control person for canned peas, a vegetable he absolutely detested. He enjoyed ice skating on frozen ponds in Kansas, and he'd pull us girls around the pond and the river lakes on a sled. But tennis was his game and the game he loved. Every Sunday morning, he played on the Kansas State University courts, always dressed in classic white, and played many times against the men of the Kansas State University tennis team. And he continued this well into his mid-60s. Every month or so, he'd drive his Buick, he always owned a Buick, to Kansas City to play tennis at the Rock Hill Tennis Club. He did his own yard work. He put up birdhouses, tended his roses and his morning glories like his father before him. His daily exercise was walking the 2 miles from our house to his university office 3 times a day. Nobody had ever heard of walking shoes in those days, so this was done in street shoes, in suit and tie. He was a snappy dresser, always preferred Brooks Brothers suits because they traveled well and looked good after long plane flights. As mentioned, he was introduced to his wife Annabelle in Fostoria by mutual friends, and their first date was in 1937 to the then brand new and experimental movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He loved his family, but he was always slightly befuddled by 3 daughters. Dad was a voracious reader of mainly scientific, trade, and foreign affairs publications, and Margot tells us that the night before he died, he was actually reading a copy of the Baking and Milling News. His favorite TV show was Perry Mason, and the household came to a halt during that hour show. He enjoyed Goofy and Pluto, Disney's characters, and he'd laugh until he shook at their antics. He had a sly sense of humor and did so enjoy a good joke. As mentioned, his consulting assignments took him all over the world, to the Soviet Union, other countries behind the Iron Curtain, Central South America, and Asia. Was an independent thinker, had a very logical mind, and was acutely aware of the political climate of every country he visited. In 1970, while on an assignment in Guatemala, and there was guerrilla activities in the country at the time, he was offered a private car, a driver, and an armed bodyguard to get from his apartment to work. He declined, preferring to take the bus and walk and an irregular schedule, pointing out that those who were being assassinated were in the official car with a driver and the bodyguard. With all his official travels, he rarely took a personal vacation. However, every August, the family would get in the car, we'd drive to Kansas City for shopping, and we'd visit the Swope Park Zoo, where he claimed he saw more animals' belly buttons than anything else because the animals, because of the heat, were on their back with their paws up in the air. We'd stay at the Mulebalk Hotel, where he treated himself to a shave, a manicure, and a haircut. Then he'd take his ladies to the President Hotel down the block to the drum room for dinner and dancing. He and Mother were excellent ballroom dancers. Our father appreciated everyone's point of view, and when you spoke with him, he would always take off his reading glasses, look you directly in the eye, and give you his undivided attention. He had high standards for himself and for others, and a flash of temper when it suited him. He was known by some, and always behind his back, as Give 'em Hell Schellenberger, when his standards weren't met. He had a knack for getting to the root of a problem. In 1957, Waters Hall burned, which housed the department, in a fire so hot it melted all the equipment in the mill. The Department of Agriculture sent repeated requests for the serial numbers. This was pre-computer. They had no serial numbers. These exchanges went back and forth for quite some time, and finally, in exasperation, Dad hired a helicopter and a photographer to photograph the twisted metal. He then sent those photographs to Washington with a note attached, "Here are your serial numbers." The request ceased. I guess pictures were worth 1,000 words. He was fully dedicated to his department, to the university, and to the advancement of science of baking, feed technology, and flour milling. His goal was to educate and train professionals who would use that knowledge to benefit all people. And he was instrumental in getting the milling and baking industries involved in the department, which would become world-renowned. If our father had a motto, it was expressed in a watercolor cartoon that he hung in his office and now hangs in my office. And it depicts a turtle, and the turtle's racing along and the dust is flying out from under his feet. He's leaning forward, his neck is stretched way out, the frogs are jumping out of the way, the duck has his beak hanging open in complete amazement, and the title says, "Observe the turtle. He makes progress only when his neck is out." Well, Dad was willing to work with his neck out, taking chances, and he always made progress. We do thank you all so much.
As a grateful industry, we are pleased to honor Dr. John Schellenberger as an inductee in the 2016 Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much.
So just another tidbit. Margot works on your flour and your wheat quality in the wheat quality lab in Manhattan, just in case you think the legacy ended. And just another small 2 or 3 degrees of separation, Joan is married to a Stearns, and for those of you that knew Mark Stearns, Joan is his sister-in-law. So it's a small world. Before we go on to the next, I'd just like to encourage those of you in the audience to nominate people from your company or people that have inspired you in your career or who have been the thin threads that allowed you to get where you are today. Because going to Schellenberger Hall in 1970-something to tour it is the only reason I'm standing here today. And it's a blessing and it's an honor to represent people that have made those differences. So we encourage you to nominate those people in your life. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Teresa, and thank you, Ken, for all your help and hard work. Thank you all.